Chani was pregnant, which meant that for a while they had to keep her away from him. She was in good health, but pregnancy did not make for good nursing, so Paul had to go back to the ship, leaving Chani with the Reverend Mothers. That was not a very good experience for Paul. The Reverend Mothers had never liked him. They had always been clear to Paul that their only motive for keeping him alive was to torment him. Their attitude was not that they had made a mistake in taking him away from his parents. They knew that his parents would have killed him. Their attitude was that they had the right to make Paul suffer, and they meant to do it. So, he left Chani with him, but that did not mean that she had no companionship. There was another young woman who was pregnant, the girl called Martyr, and there were 2 older women in the group of captive females. The older women had a very special place in the society of the Bene Gesserit. One was the daughter of a prominent guild ship captain, the other was the widow of the emperor of all the known worlds. And there were many others, all pregnant. The Reverend Mothers had been working on a secret project for many years. Now the time had come when it could be activated. The Reverend Mothers, all of whom were also experienced in genetics, were in effect creating a new generation of Bene Gesserit sisters. This would not only create an enormous reservoir of potential sisters, but also, when the proper moment came, it would be ready to use it to replace those who had been killed. It was a plan conceived by Aelia herself and carried out with great dedication by the Reverend Mothers. It would have been carried out by the guilds themselves if the Bene Gesserits had not preempted the guild's plans. It was a plan whose time had now arrived. When Paul went back to the ship, he found that Chani had given birth to a son and that all the other women who were pregnant also had children. They had been joined by a few of the younger girls who had been captured during the Battle of Corin. For several weeks, while the young women recovered and were taken care of by the Reverend Mothers, Paul remained with Chani in her quarters on the No ship, and then one morning he awakened to find that the little boy had vanished. He searched everywhere for him, but there was no trace of him anywhere. He was very angry with Chani for having given the child to the Reverend Mothers. But Chani was not there. She had gone off with the other young women and their babies and the old women and their girls, all of them heading for the planet that lay hidden in the outer spiral arm. Paul was furious at Chani for having done this, and even more furious with himself for not having prevented her. He was very bitter at her for having taken away his son and the last chance he might ever have to know his son. He could have gone back into the Bene Gesserit compound and demanded to see Chani and his son, but he did not do that. He stayed away from the No ship as much as possible. And then, after a few weeks of searching, he came across something he could not believe. There were 2 other children in the compound who had been born at almost the same time as his son. And one of those children had grown up into the most powerful Reverend Mother in the Bene Gesserit order. Paul had to see her. He had to see her because she was his mother. He wanted to see her because she was the only mother he would ever have.